There we go. I have my nice Pittsburgh Dad shirt. And a cat. Welcome back to Hot Dad Reads, where I read you a book every night, unless, I'm busy. I'm excited. Having had my first Father's Day, I got a Pittsburgh Dad t-shirt that the cat is now blocking from view. Wow, he's got a face. There we go. So, we're reading Les Miserables, and come on now. There we go. We're on chapter 10, but I'm just calling it part 3, because this has multiple parts, multiple books, multiple chapters. It's just madness trying to keep track of it. But, the book weighs more than you do, Captain, so I need you to settle so I don't crush you with it. There we go. So let's dive right in. Chapter 10, The Bishop in the Presence of an Unknown Light. Oh, no. So I made chicken tenders tonight so that way I could have fried chicken salad, and Captain is sitting right on my stomach. Hey, buddy. Come on. There we go. Here we go. Chapter 10. Shortly after the date of the letter cited in the pages above, he did something even more dangerous, as the whole town would have it, than his mountain excursion through bandit territory. In the countryside near Diné lived a man all by himself. This man was, let us straightway utter the dread word, a former member of the Convention. His name was G. In the little world of Diné, member of the Convention G was spoken of with a kind of horror. A member of the Convention? Can you imagine? That went back to the days when all forms of respect were abandoned and everyone was addressed as citizen. This man was almost a monster. He did not vote for the king's death, but little short of it. He was all but a regicide. He had done terrible things. How was it that on the return of our lawful rulers, the man had not been prosecuted by a criminal court? He need not have had his head cut off, if you like. There must be clemency, agreed, but a good lifelong banishment as an example, for goodness sake, etc., etc. Besides, he was an atheist like all the rest of those people. The cackling of geese with regard to the vulture. But was G actually a vulture? Yes, to judge by the unsociable nature of his solitude. Not having voted for the death of the king, he had not been included in the edicts of exile and had been able to remain in France. He dwelt at 3/4 of an hour's distance from the town, far from any hamlet, far from any road, in a remote spot, heaven knows where, in a very wild valley. It was said he had some kind of a small holding there, a bolt hole, a retreat. No neighbors, not even passers-by. Since he had been living in the valley, that path that led there had become overgrown. People spoke about that place as if it were the home of an executioner. However, the bishop would reflect, and from time to time gaze at the horizon, where a clump of trees marked the old member of the Convention's valley, and he would say, "There's an isolated soul out there." And deep in his own mind, he added, "I owe him a visit." But let us admit this idea, on the face of it a natural one, after a moment's reflection, appeared to him outlandish and impossible, almost repellent. For he basically shared the general impression, and the member of the Convention inspired in him, without his being clearly conscious of it, that feeling bordering as it were on hatred and so well expressed by the word aversion. Still, should his sheep's scab cause the shepherd to recoil? No, but what a sheep! The good bishop felt confused. Sometimes he would start off in that direction, then return. Finally, there came a day when news spread through town that some sort of young shepherd had made himself useful to the member of the convention in his lair, had come to fetch a doctor. The old villain was dying. He had creeping paralysis and would not survive the night. Thank God, some people added. The bishop took his staff, put on his overcoat because of his rather too threadbare cassock we have already referred to, and also because of the evening breeze that was bound to freshen before long, and set out. The sun was sinking and almost touching the horizon when the bishop arrived in that shunned place. He realized with a certain pounding of his heart that he was close to the den. He strode across a ditch, came through a fence, lifted a barrier, entered an ill-attended vegetable garden, advanced a few steps quite boldly, and all at once, on the far side of the neglected plot, behind some tall brambles, he saw the lair. It was a very low-built hut, stark, small, and clean, and a vine attached to the front of it. In front of the door, in an old chair on wheels, the peasant's armchair, sat a man with white hair smiling at the sun. By the old man stood a young boy, the shepherd lad. He was offering the old man a bowl of milk. While the bishop watched, the old man spoke aloud. "Thank you," he said. "I don't need anything more." And his smile turned from the sun to rest on the child. The bishop moved forward. At the sound of his footsteps, the seated old man looked round, and his face expressed all the surprise a man is capable of after a long life. This is the first time since I've been here," he said, "that anyone has come to my house. Who are you, monsieur?" The bishop answered, "My name is Bienvenu Meriel." Bienvenu Meriel. I've heard that name. Are you the man the people call Monseigneur Bienvenu? I am. The old man resumed with a half smile. In that case, you are my bishop? Indeed. Come in, monsieur. The member of the convention offered his hand to the bishop, but the bishop did not take it. All he said was, "I'm glad to see I was misinformed. You certainly don't look ill to me." "Monsieur," replied the old man, "I'm going to get better." He paused and said, "I shall be dead in 3 hours' time." Then he went on, "I'm something of a doctor. I know how the end comes. Yesterday only my feet were cold. Today the chill is in my knees. Now I feel it rising to my waist. When it reaches my heart, I shall cease to be. Isn't the sun splendid? I had myself wheeled out here to take a last look at things. You can talk to me. It doesn't tire me. You do well to come and watch a man who's going to die. It's right there should be witnesses to that moment. We all have our own little fancies. I'd like to have lasted till dawn, but I know I have barely 3 hours left. It'll be dark. Anyway, what difference does it make? Dying is a simple matter. There's no need for daylight. Very well then. I shall die by starlight. There's more in the chapter, but I am profoundly uncomfortable. Hey, buddy. Listen. You're like, you're a real good cat. And everybody likes you. That's everybody. And they like you. Yeah. How many fans are on in my house? I'll be right back. Hey, hey. Oh, Lord, he coming. Come on, figure it out. Come on, you can do it. Move your paws, figure it out. Come on. Oh, you're adorable. You're a good kitty. The old man turned to the shepherd. You go to bed. You stayed up with me all last night. You're tired. The young lad went inside. The old man's eyes followed him, and as though talking to himself, he added, While he sleeps, I shall die. Our two forms of rest can be good company for each other. The bishop was not affected by this, as might have been expected. He did not think there was any sense of God in this manner of dying, to tell the whole truth, for the little inconsistencies of the great-hearted needed to be signaled like everything else. He who was so quick to laugh at His Highness, when the occasion arose, was rather shocked not to be addressed as Monseigneur, and was almost tempted to reply, Citizen. He had an inclination to be ungraciously familiar, which was common enough in doctors and priests, but not typical of him. After all, this man, this member of the convention, this representative of the people, had been one of the mighty of this world. For perhaps the first time in his life, the bishop felt in the mood to be stern. Meanwhile, the member of the convention had been looking at him with unassuming friendliness, in which might have been discerned the appropriate humility in one so close to his return to dust. Although he generally guarded against curiosity, as he saw it bordering on sin, the bishop, for his part, could not help studying the member of the convention with an attentiveness that, seeing it did not spring from sympathy, his conscience would probably have reproached him, for had it been directed at any other man, a member of the convention struck him as being something of an outlaw, beyond even the laws of charity. Composed, almost straight-backed, with a ringing voice, G was one of those great octogenarians that leave the physiologist amazed. The revolution produced many of these men suited to the age. You could sense that this old man was a man who had stood the test. So near to his end, he had preserved all the signs of good health. In his clear gaze, his firm voice, the robust movement of his shoulders, there was cause enough to perplex death. Azrael, the Mohammedan angel of the sepulchre, would have turned back and thought he had come to the wrong door. G seemed to be dying because that was what he wanted. There was freedom in his dying. Only his legs were immobile. By them the shades held fast to him. His feet were lifeless and cold, and his head was alive with all the power of life and appeared in full brightness. At this solemn moment, G resembled the king in that oriental tale who was made of flesh above and of marble below. There was a rock. The bishop sat on it. He began without preamble. I congratulate you, he said in a tone of reproof. At least you didn't vote for the king's death. The member of the convention did not seem to notice the bitter implication underlying the words, at least. He answered. The smile had completely disappeared from his face. Don't congratulate me unduly, monsieur. I did vote for the end of the tyrant. This was austereness of tone confronting sternness of tone. What do you mean? Said the bishop. I mean, man has a tyrant. Ignorance. I voted for the end of that tyrant. That tyrant begot royalty, which is authority falsely understood, while science is authority rightly understood. Man should be governed only by science. And conscience, added the bishop. It's the same thing. Conscience is the quantity of innate science we have within us. Monsignor Bienvenu listened, somewhat surprised, to this language that was very new to him. Chicken strips. I'd be a lot more comfortable if the cat wasn't here, I have to admit. But he's a really good cat, and I'm happy that he's here. Yeah. Look at that tail. Look at that. Elevator butt. Elevator butt. Yeah. The member of the convention went on. So far as Louis XVI was concerned, I said no. I didn't think I had the right to kill a man, but I felt it my duty to exterminate evil. I voted for the end of the tyrant. That's to say, the end of prostitution for women, the end of slavery for men, the end of benightedness for children. In voting for the Republic, that's what I voted for. I voted for fraternity, reconciliation, a new dawn. I assisted in the overthrow of prejudice and error. The collapse of prejudice and error creates light. We brought down the old world, and the old world, that vessel of misery, in being overturned on the human race, has become an urn of joy. Not unmixed joy, said the bishop. You could say clouded joy. And now, after that disastrous return of the past, called 1814, vanished joy. Alas, the work wasn't finished, I admit. We destroyed the old order in its deeds. We were not able entirely to abolish it in its thoughts. To put an end to abuses is not enough. Attitudes must change. The mill has gone. The wind is still there. You've brought about destruction. Destruction can be useful, but I distrust destruction compounded with anger. Justice has its anger, Monsieur l'Evêque. And the anger of justice is an element of progress. In any case, and whatever anyone may say, the French Revolution is the greatest step forward taken by the human race since the advent of Christ. Unfinished, maybe, but sublime. It has worked out all the unknowns in the social equation. It has tempered minds, calmed, appeased, enlightened. It has sent tides of civilization sweeping across the earth. It has been a good thing. The French Revolution is the consecration of humanity. The bishop could not refrain from murmuring, "Oh yes, and 1793. The member of the convention straightened up in his chair with almost lugubrious solemnity. And in so far as a dying man is capable of crying out, he cried out, "Ah, there you are, 1793. I was expecting to hear that. A cloud gathered for 1,500 years. At the end of 15 centuries, it burst, and you put the thunderbolt on trial." Without perhaps admitting it to himself, the bishop felt that something within him was extinguished. Nevertheless, he put on a brave face. He replied, "The judge speaks in the name of justice. The priest speaks in the name of pity, which is nothing but a higher form of justice. A thunderbolt must not be misplaced." And gazing steadily at the member of the convention, he added, "Louis XVII?" The convention member reached out his hand and seized the bishop by the arm. "Louis XVII, come now. Who is it that you mourn? Is it the innocent child? In that case, very well, I mourn with you. Is it the royal child? I need to think about that. For me, Cartouche's brother, an innocent child, hanged by the arms until dead in Place de Grève for the sole crime of being the brother of Cartouche, is martyred in the tower of the Temple prison for the sole crime of being the grandson of Louis XV. Monsieur, said the bishop, I don't like this association of those names. Cartouche? Louis XV? Which of them do you speak for? There was a moment's silence. The bishop almost regretted having come, and yet he felt vaguely and strangely unsettled. I'm in a not small amount of pain. This is interesting. The member of the convention went on. Ah, Monsieur le Prêtre, you don't like the plainness of truth. Christ did. He seized a rod and cleared the temple. His scourge, replete with flashes of lightning, was a rougher speaker of truths. When he cried, Sinite parvulus, suffer the little children, he made no distinction between little children. He'd have had no misgivings in seeing a kinship between the heir of Barabbas and the heir of Herod. Seeing a kinship between... Innocence, monsieur, is its own crown. Innocence has nothing to do with being royal. It's just as majestic in rags as in the fleur-de-lis. That's true, said the bishop in a quiet voice. I cannot let the matter drop, continued member of the convention G. You mentioned Louis XVII. Let's be clear. Shall we weep for every innocent, every martyr, every child, the lowly as well as the exalted? I'm with you. But then, as I said, we must go back further than 93, and our tears must start before Louis XVII. I'll weep with you over the children of kings, as long as you weep with me over the youngsters of the people. I weep for all, said the bishop. Equally, cried G. And if the balance must tip one way or the other, let it be on the side of the people. They've been suffering for longer. There was another silence. It was the member of the convention who broke it. He raised himself on one elbow, pinched his cheek between his thumb and his crooked forefinger, as you unconsciously do when you question the judge, and with his eyes filled with all the energies of a man close to death, he challenged the bishop. It was like an explosion. Yes, monsieur, it's a long time that the people have been suffering, and besides, that's not all. Why do you come here to question me and talk to me about Louis XVII? I don't know you. Ever since I've been in this part of the world, I've lived alone in this enclave, never setting foot outside, seeing no one but that child who helps me. It's true, your name has vaguely come to my knowledge, spoken of not too badly, I have to say, but that doesn't mean anything. Clever individuals have so many ways of deceiving the honest man of the people. By the way, I didn't hear the sound of your carriage. You no doubt left it over there, behind the trees where the road divides. I just don't know you. You told me you were the bishop, but that doesn't tell me anything about your moral character, so I repeat my question. Who are you? You're a bishop. That's to say, a prince of the church, one of those gilded, emblazoned men of means who have fat stipends. The bishopric of Digne, 15,000 francs fixed salary, 10,000 in additional income total, 25,000 francs, who have kitchens, who have liveried servants, who live well, who eat moor hen on Friday, who go parading around in a ceremonial coach with a footman in front, a footman behind, who have palaces, who keep their own carriage in the name of Jesus Christ, who went barefoot. You're a cleric. Revenues, palaces, horses, servants, a good table, all the pleasures of life. You have that, just like the rest of them. And like the rest of them, you enjoy it well and good, but that's either saying too much or not enough. It doesn't shed any light for me on the intrinsic and essential worth of someone who comes to me with the probable intention of bringing me wisdom. Who am I speaking to? Who are you? The bishop hung his head and replied, Vermis sum. Psalm 22:6. Ego autem sum vermis, et non homo, opprobrium hominum, et abjectio plebis. But I am a worm and no man, a reproach of men, and despised of the people. An earthworm in a carriage, muttered the member of the convention. It was the turn of the member of the convention to be human, and of the bishop to be humble. The bishop replied quietly, Maybe so. But explain to me how my carriage, standing near by behind those trees, my good table, and the moorhens I eat on Fridays, my 25,000 francs income, my palace, and my footmen prove that we are not bound to be merciful, and that 93 was not pitiless. The member of the convention wiped his hand across his brow as though to brush away a cloud. Before answering, he said, I beg your pardon. I behaved badly just now. You're in my home. You're my guest. I owe it to you to be courteous. You're debating my ideas, and I should confine myself to attacking your arguments. Your wealth and your pleasures are advantages I hold against you in the debate, but it's good manners not to exploit them. I promise not to resort to doing so again. Thank you, said the bishop. G continued, Let's return to that explanation you were asking for. What were you saying? That 93 was pitiless? Pitiless, yes, said the bishop. What do you think of Marat clapping his hands at the guillotine? What do you think of Busseau singing the Te Deum to celebrate the Dragonades? The retort was a harsh one, but it found its mark with the sureness of a steel-tipped blade. The bishop winced. He had no answer, but he was offended by this reference to Busseau. The best of minds have their idols, and sometimes feel vaguely hurt by logic's want of respect. The member of the convention began to pant. The asthma that affects the man close to death, mingling with his last gasps, broke his voice. Yet there was still a perfect lucidity of spirit in his eyes. He went on, Let's say a few more words about this and that, by all means, leaving aside the revolution, which, taken as a whole, is a tremendous assertion of humanity. 93 is, alas, a response. You consider it pitiless. But what of the entire monarchy, monsieur? Carrier is a villain. Carrier, probably? But what do you call Montrevel? For Quartinville is a scoundrel, but what's your opinion of Lamont Baville? Mallard is dreadful, but Saul Tavan, if you please? Pierre Duchesne is vicious, but how would you describe Pierre Letellier? Jordan Coutet is a monster, but a lesser one than the Marquis de Louvois. Monsieur, I feel sorry for Archduchess and Queen Marie Antoinette. But I also feel sorry for that poor Huguenot woman who, in 1685, under Louis the Great, monsieur, while nursing her child, was tied to a stake, naked to the waist, and the child taken from her. Her breast was swollen with milk and her heart with anguish. Pale and famished, the child, close to death, saw that breast and cried. And giving the woman the choice between the death of her child and the death of her conscience, the executioner said to the nursing mother, "Recant." What do you say to that tantalus torture being applied to a mother? Just remember this, monsieur, the French Revolution had its reasons. Its anger will be forgiven by the future. It has resulted in a better world. Out of its most terrible deeds comes a cherishing of humankind. I won't go on. I'll stop there. I'll have the winning hand. Besides, I'm dying. And ceasing to gaze at the bishop, the member of the convention concluded his argument with these few calm words. Yes, the brutalities of progress are called revolutions. When they are over, what we recognize is this: the human race has had a rough time, but it has advanced. The member of the convention did not suspect that he had taken by storm the bishop's every successive inner retrenchment, one after the other. However, there remained yet one more, and from this retrenchment, the last redoubt of Monseigneur Bienvenu's resistance, came this reply, in which nearly all his original asperity returned. Progress must believe in God. Good cannot be served by the ungodly. The atheist is a bad guide for the human race. The old representative of the people did not reply. A tremor went through him. He looked up at the sky, and a tear slowly gathered in that upturned gaze. The tear, filling his eye, trickled down his pallid cheek, and talking to himself in an undertone, his gaze lost in the remote depths, he said, almost stammering, "Oh, you, the ideal. You alone exist." The bishop experienced a sort of inexpressible turmoil. After a pause, the old man raised a finger skywards and said, "The infinite exists. It is there. If the infinite had no selfhood, selfhood would set a limit upon it. It would not be infinite. In other words, there would be no such thing, yet exist it does. So it has a self. That selfhood of the infinite is God." The dying man delivered these last words in a loud voice and with a shiver of ecstasy, as if he could see someone. After he had spoken, his eyes closed. The effort had exhausted him. It was obvious he had just lived the few hours of life left to him within the space of a minute. What he had just said had brought him closer to the presence of death. His end was near. The bishop realized this. Time was running out. It was as a priest that he had come. From extreme coldness he had passed by degrees to extreme emotion. He looked at those closed eyes. He took that icy, wrinkled old hand in his and bent over the dying man. This moment belongs to God. Do you not think it would be a pity if we were to have met in vain? The member of the convention opened his eyes again. A gravity in which there was sorrow was imprinted on his countenance. "Monsieur l'Evêque," he said with a slowness that perhaps owed more to his dignity of soul than his failing strength. "I have spent my life in meditation, study, and contemplation. I was 60 years of age when my country called me and bid me become involved in its affairs. I obeyed. There were abuses, I fought against them. There were tyrannies, I destroyed them. There were rights and principles. I proclaimed and upheld them. The territory was invaded. I defended it. France was threatened. I was prepared to die for her. I was not rich. I am poor. I was one of the rulers of the state. The vaults of the treasury were so full of coin, its walls, about to burst with the pressure of gold and silver, had to be reinforced. I used to dine in Rue de l'Arbre-Sec for 22 sous. I've helped the oppressed. I've comforted those who were suffering. I've torn the cloth from the altar, it's true, but I did so to bind the wounds of my country. I've always supported the onward march of the human race towards the light, and I've sometimes resisted ruthless progress. I have on occasion protected my own adversaries, your people. And there is at Petegem, in Flanders, at the very spot where the Merovingian kings had their summer palace, an urbanist convent, the Abbey of Saint Clair de Beaulieu, which I saved in 1793. I've done my duty to the best of my ability, and whatever good I was able to do. After which I was pursued, hounded, persecuted, vilified, mocked, decried, cursed, ostracized. For quite some years now, white-haired as I am, I've been conscious that a great many people think they have the right to despise me. The poor, ignorant mob sees me as damned, and I accept without hating anyone this isolation of hatred. I'm now 86 years old. I'm about to die. What is it you want of me? Your blessing, said the bishop, and he knelt down. When the bishop looked up again, the member of the convention's expression had become majestic. He had just breathed his last. The bishop returned home, deeply absorbed in who knows what thoughts. He spent the whole night in prayer. The next day, a few good people of an inquisitive nature attempted to speak to him about member of the Convention G. He simply pointed heavenward. From then on, his kindness towards the humble and the unfortunate and his fellow feeling for them increased. Any reference to that old villain G caused him to fall into a peculiar abstraction. No one could say that the passing of that soul before his own and the reflection of that great conscience on his own did not somehow contribute to his approach to perfection. That pastoral visit naturally gave rise to a good deal of murmuring among all the little local cliques. Was that the proper place for a bishop, at the bedside of a dying man such as he? There was obviously no respect of any conversion. All those revolutionaries are relapsed heretics. So why go there? What did he go to see? He must have been very curious to witness a soul carried off by the devil. One day a dowager of that impertinent breed that considers itself witty came out with this sarcastic remark: "Monseigneur, people are wondering when your grace will be wearing the red cap." "Oh, now there's a color that covers a multitude of sins," replied the bishop. "Fortunately, those who despise it in a cap respect it in a hat." The cat is asleep on my phone. Great job, buddy. Yeah, about 20 minutes. I think we can do one more chapter. But, hey, ad break. Stop what you're doing. Go to patreon.com/hotdadreads. There's 4 different levels. There's a cheap one. It's $5. There's an expensive one. It's $25. Click the cheap one. Go ahead. Click the cheapest one. It's fine. And then you get access to the super secret Saturday Shakespeare stream, which is what I want to be doing. And having an audience and having people show up for that, pile of fun. If you really want to do the expensive one, if you want to spend $25 a month, that way I'll read something that you submit, your book, your novel, your play, your song, whatever it is, as long as it's not racist or misogynist or something like that. Yeah, let's go. Click that one too. But just go to patreon.com/hotdadreads. Check it out. Water does my heart good. It's a little harsh, a little yelly with a member of the convention G. So I'm going to try to tone it down a notch now. Let my voice be comfortable. Why am I taking a break? It's so that way you can go to patreon.com/hotdadreads. Patreon.com/hotdadreads. And hey, this is twitch.tv/hotdadreads. So, hit the follow button. It's an easy thing to do. If you're seeing this and you don't want to give me money, that's fine. Just hit the follow button. I'll wait. I'm trying to deal with a front wedgie here. There we go. Chapter 11. One Reservation. We would be in great danger of deceiving ourselves if we were to conclude from this that Monsignor Bienvenu was a philosopher bishop or a patriot parish priest. His encounter, we might almost call it a convergence, with a member of the Convention G, left him with a sort of wonder that made him yet more kindly. That is all. Although Monsignor Bienvenu could not have been less of a politician, this is perhaps the place to outline very briefly what his position was with regard to the events of that time, assuming that Monsignor Bienvenu ever thought of having a position. So let us go back a few years. Some time after Monsieur Myriel was raised to the episcopacy, the emperor had made him a baron of the empire at the same time as several other bishops. The arrest of the Pope took place, as we all know, on the night of the 5th to the 6th of July, 1809. What? That's today! Neat. Monsieur Myriel was summoned by Napoleon to the Synod of Bishops of France and Italy, convened in Paris thereafter. This synod was held at Notre Dame and met for the first time on the 15th of June, 1811, under the presidency of Cardinal Fesch. Monsieur Myriel was one of the 95 bishops who attended it, but he was present only at one sitting and at 3 or 4 private discussions. Bishop of a mountain diocese, living in rural simplicity so close to nature, he apparently introduced among these eminent men ideas that altered the temperature of the assembly. He very soon came back to Dinan. He was asked about his speedy return, and he replied, "I disturbed them. The air from outside reached them through me. I had the effect of an open door on them." On another occasion he said, "What can you expect? Those gentlemen are princes. I'm just a poor country bishop." The fact is that he caused offense. Among other strange things, one evening when he was at the house of one of his most distinguished colleagues, he is supposed to have let slip the remark, "Such beautiful clocks, such beautiful carpets, such beautiful liveries. They must be very disturbing. Oh, I wouldn't want to have all these luxuries crying constantly in my ears. There are people who are hungry. There are people who are cold. There are poor people. There are poor people. Man, that's good. Let us say, by the way, that hatred of luxury would not be an intelligent hatred. It is a hatred that would imply hatred of the arts. Nevertheless, other than for official and ceremonial purposes, luxury among churchmen is a transgression. It would seem to reveal habits of little true charitableness. A wealthy priest is a contradiction in terms. The priest ought to remain close to the poor. Now, is it possible to be constantly in contact, night and day, with every hardship, every adversity, every want, without getting a little of that saintly poverty on oneself, like the dust of honest toil? Is it imaginable for a man to be near a brazier and not be warm? Is it imaginable for a workman to be laboring constantly at a furnace and to have neither a singed hair, nor a blackened nail, nor a drop of sweat, nor a speck of ash on his face? The first proof of charity in a priest, in a bishop especially, is poverty. This is no doubt what the Bishop of Digne thought. It would be mistaken to think, however, that on certain delicate issues he shared what we shall call the ideas of the century. He was little involved in the theological quarrels of the day and remained silent on matters regarding the church and the state. But had he been strongly pressed, we probably would have found he was rather more ultramontane than Gallican. Since we are presenting a portrait and do not wish to conceal anything, we are compelled to add that he had no sympathy for Napoleon in his decline. From 1813 he supported or applauded every demonstration of opposition. The bishop refused to see him on his way through France after his return from the island of Elba, and declined to ordain that public prayers be said for the emperor in his diocese during the 100 Days. Apart from his sister, Mademoiselle Baptistine, the bishop had two brothers, one a general, the other a prefect. He wrote quite frequently to both of them. He was for a while censorious towards the former, because while holding a command in Provence, at the time of the landing at Cannes, the general had led 1,200 men in pursuit of the emperor like someone who wanted to let him escape. His correspondence remained more affectionate with the other brother, the former prefect, an honest and decent man who lived in retirement in Paris, on Rue Cassette. So Monseigneur Bienvenu, too, had his hour of partisan feeling, his hour of bitterness, his dark cloud. The passions of the day created a passing shadow in this noble and gentle spirit devoted to things eternal. Certainly such a man would have done well not to have any political opinions. Let there be no misunderstanding of what we think. We do not confuse what are called political opinions with the grand aspiration for progress, with the sublime, patriotic, democratic, humane faith, which today ought to be the very foundation of all generous understanding. Without delving into questions only indirectly connected with the subject of this book, we simply say this. It would have been a fine thing if Monseigneur Bienvenu had not been a royalist, and if his gaze had never for one moment been directed away from that serene contemplation of those three pure lights, truth, justice, and charity, that are distinctly visible shining above the stormy comings and goings of human affairs. While granting it was not for political office that God created Monseigneur Bienvenu, we might have understood and admired in him protest in the name of legality and liberty, proud opposition, legitimate but perilous resistance to the all-powerful Napoleon. But what pleases us in the treatment of those on their way up is less pleasing in the treatment of those on their way down. We approve of fighting only so long as there is danger, and in any case only those who fought in the first instance have the right to be exterminators at the last. He who has not been a persistent opponent in times of prosperity should remain silent when the downfall comes. Challenging success gives the only legitimacy to prosecuting failure. For our own part, when Providence intervenes, let it strike where it will. The year 1812 starts to disarm us. In 1813, the cowardly breach of silence on the part of a reticent legislative body emboldened by a catastrophe was worthy of nothing but indignation, and it was wrong to applaud it. In 1814, confronted with those treacherous marshals, with that Senate going from one baseness to the next, disparaging the once deified, with that idolatry and retreat spitting on its idol, it was a moral obligation to avert one's eyes. In 1815, when ultimate disaster was in the air, when France shuddered at its sinister approach, when Waterloo could be dimly discerned lying in wait for Napoleon, there was nothing derisory about the mournful cheers from the army and from the people for the man destined to fall. And with all due reservation with regard to the despot, a man of such sensibility as the Bishop of Digne should not perhaps have failed to recognize what was noble and affecting in the close embrace of a great nation and a great man on the brink of ruin. With this one shortcoming, he was in all things just, sincere, fair, intelligent, humble and worthy, doing good and being kind, which is another way of doing good. He was a priest, a man of wisdom and humanity. It must be said that even in that political opinion for which we have just criticized him, and which we are inclined to judge almost severely, he was tolerant and easy-going, more so, perhaps, than the person who writes these words. The doorkeeper at the town hall had been given this position by the emperor. He was an elderly, non-commissioned officer of the Old Guard, awarded the Legion of Honor at Austerlitz, as Bonapartist as the eagle. This poor fellow occasionally came out with some ill-considered remarks that the law of the day deemed seditious talk. After the imperial profile disappeared from the Legion of Honor, he never wore his regimentals, as he used to say, so that he would not have to wear his cross. He had himself solemnly removed the imperial effigy from the cross Napoleon had given him, which left a hole, and he would not put anything in its place. "I'd sooner die," he said, "than wear the 3 toads over my heart." He had a readiness to mock Louis XVIII aloud. "Gouty old man in his English gaiters, let him go to Prussia in his pigtailed wig. He would say, delighted to unite in the same denunciation the 2 things he most detested, Prussia and England. As a result, he ended up losing his position. There he was, with no livelihood, out on the street with his wife and children. The bishop sent for him, mildly scolded him, and made him verger over the cathedral. Monsieur Myriel was a true pastor, a friend to everyone in the diocese. Over the course of 9 years, Monseigneur Bienvenu had, by his saintly deeds and kindly ways, filled the town of Digne with a sort of affectionate and filial veneration. Even his attitude towards Napoleon had been accepted and tacitly pardoned, so to speak, by the people, his flock of frail, good-hearted souls who adored their emperor but loved their bishop. And I think that's going to do it for us tonight. Watcha. Hey, buddy. The internet loves you. You're doing a great job. You're a good kitty. That's the captain. Yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Hit up the Patreon. Make sure to follow at Twitch. And, let me know what you think. Hit me up on Instagram or Twitter at HotDadReads. And, I don't know, leave comments if you're watching this on YouTube, whatever you want. You're all lovely people. And I'm very tired. And I'm a Pittsburgh dad. Have a good night, everybody.